Hi, this is Sierra Lopez, and I am here to share my digital learning unit. So, as you can see, my digital learning unit is on Google Classroom. All things on here can be taught virtually, they can be taught face to face, or they can be taught in a hybrid. Um, Over here, we have Google Meets, and I don't keep the class code up there all the time. I have it hidden normally because if not, they'll try to get on there. But students can use that class code to join Google Meets if we're in need to meet virtually. All assignments on here as well can be printed, but students do have their Chromebooks during class, so a lot of times we use it even when we're in face to face. So, the way I have Google Classroom set up is I do morning messages on here, and then under classwork, I have parent information, procedures, and contact information here. And then I have just the lessons set up by day. So, lesson one, lesson two, lesson three. Some things I just wanted to explain before I get into all the content on here is that. Each lesson is set up with instructions, and then also I used Screencastify to verbally give directions as well in each lesson. Current research says, according to studies performed by OSF Healthcare as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics, that students ages 6 to 10 should not have more than 6 hours of screen time a day. My students are in fourth grade and they need to stay under about 6 hours. So, there's also research that just talks about the benefits of healthy monitored screen time, which is what everything that we do is, and they will never go over the 6 hours within a school day of screen time. So we'll have breaks and we'll have things that they do more hands on, even if it's on video, and then also. There will be obviously some things that they do on the computer as well. All right, so we are going to dive in. Just wanted to just kind of go over the standards. The standards that I use are ELA GSE 4RL6, which is that students will be able to use grade appropriate vocabulary. RL4, which is just talking about character setting and plot. Students will be able to identify that in a story and describe it using details in the story. And then RL2, which students will be able to determine the theme of a story using the details in the story. All of my lessons activate prior knowledge because they build on top of one another. So the very first lesson will be where they just learn vocabulary. And that is right here on lesson one. They'll go over the focus vocabulary, which is character setting and plot, problem and solution. And with this activity, they're basically, I'm using the strategy of Marzano's six-step vocabulary. I've done a lot of research and taken some PLs on this, and I really, really like it. It's just 6 steps where students are getting the exposure to these vocabulary words that they need to actually put it into their working memory and retain those vocabulary words so that they can use them and remember them for further use. And it's not where they memorize and then dump it later. So, for this, I needed to assess their prior knowledge, and I used map testing, and then I also used prior observations that I made on my students to group them. And groups will be done either in person in the classroom. I'll pull them for small group. They are assigned red, orange, green, or yellow, and then if not, then we'll also have breakout rooms that'll work essentially the same. So all learning targets and objectives all align with with the Georgia Standards of Excellence. Day one is students will be able to acquire and use academic vocabulary with 80% accuracy. And then on this day, we're going to be using Google Drawings. And I made it a blank Google drawing because my students are so creative, and that is one of the things that really goes into their intrinsic motivation. They love to be able to decorate, draw, and in Google Drawings, they'll be able to use academic language that we learn after we do our small group lesson. I mean, our whole group lesson, and they'll be able to do three things. They will come up with they'll have the vocabulary word, they'll have the definition, they'll come up with their own definition, and then they'll come up with a drawing to represent that definition. And that goes back to Marzano's 6-step vocabulary use and strategy. Okay, so with this, we are going to be doing a Nearpod, and in this Nearpod, they're going to be they're going to be matching the vocabulary words with the definitions, and this will just be used as just a formative assessment. So, with this formative assessment, I'll be able to print out their accuracy from Nearpod to assess how well they did. And so basically, lesson one, day one, is all focused on those vocabulary words, getting that vocabulary acquisition, so that later on in the lesson, we can build on to that. Lesson two, day two, again, I have learning target slides, and I can show those. So with those, we'll be able to assess the student's ability to use and describe character settings and events. And I like to include, learning targets, success criteria. I like to include my notes that we use in class, just in case they if they're at home, they can refer back to that. All right, so to this day, they'll be getting into groups, and in their groups, they'll read their stories, they'll discuss the character setting and plot, they'll talk about if there was a problem or solution, and then using chart paper or Google Slides, depending if it's going to be virtual or in person, they'll create a story structure map. Now, these groups will work obviously in person, in the groups in the classroom. Virtually, it would be through breakout rooms. So I have read alouds for my students who need read aloud. I also will be able to give them extended time. And what my groups will be doing is they'll be getting into Flipgrid. And in Flipgrid, they're going to create a video where they display their story element map that they've created. And then I love that they'll be able to really interact and show cooperative learning by commenting on other groups. So they'll comment on other groups' work and leave, positive feedback for them. And it really builds their automaticity and just creates a really good positive learning environment. And again, intrinsic motivation. These kids love to comment, put hearts on things, love things. So this really keys in on that. And then at the end, we're going to do a little booklet. And in this booklet, it's going to ask questions about character setting and plot. And again, I'll be able to assess their knowledge on this by printing out their accuracy. Okay. So also this lesson goes into making connections across multiple disciplines, because as they're describing their story structure, they're going to be using sequencing. So they're going to say first this happened, second this happened, third this happened. So they're going to have to put things in order. Okay. And then students are going to interact to facilitate mastery through their Flipgrid. So I'll be able to see as the groups are talking, if they've been able to do that. And this also goes through the technology project, because they'll be showing their work through the Flipgrid and explaining their work. Okay, let's move on to day 3. In lesson 3, I have learning target slides as well on this day. I can determine the theme of a story based on details. I like to move on to theme, because once they're able to identify these key details like characters, setting, problem and solution. They're learning how these characters change throughout the story. And again, I go through all of the things. Whole group first. I do, we do, I do, we do, you do. And I have all the notes included in here. After we do that, we're going to do a little message in a bottle matching game. So they will match these bottles with themes. They will match these bottles with these themes, and they love fun stuff like this. It's drag and drop, very simple. Okay, following this, students are going to read The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf, and they are going to, and I provided a read aloud for my students who need read aloud. Obviously, if they need headphones or anything like that, I have that in the classroom for them. And then after they listen to The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf, what they're going to do is they're going to complete this find the theme flowchart. And I really like this flowchart because it really creates the steps and creates some scaffolding for them. So, what was the problem leads to how was the problem solved? How did the characters change? What did they learn? And I like the bottom right here because this is where I'm challenging my gifted students. So, they will be able to talk about what the author's purpose was in that. And that just challenges them a little bit because it goes beyond just the theme. And then after we're done with that, we will do a Nearpod Time to Climb. They love Time to Climb. It's essentially just a game where they're trying to climb the mountain. And they do that by answering questions. And I can also review their accuracy on there to see kind of how well they're doing. So that way I can monitor if they're getting their 75% accuracy. And again, learners are being supported with read aloud, extended time, and then author's purpose for gifted and challenging students. All right, and then my final assessment, I'm unable to pull up my Study Island because I have to go through a Clever link. But Study Island, I've created a story element and theme assessment. So it's basically having them read some passages and pulling out certain story elements like who were the characters, what was the problem, what was the solution, and then obviously theme as well because that all ties into there. It has 10 questions on it and it's self-grading. So, but I can go in and I can review what they've gotten wrong, and I love to pull students and talk with them about, what can we do next time, or what do we need to focus on? What was the problem? Do you think you rushed? We can set goals for ourselves. And then the final thing that I just wanted to mention and touch on were some teaching strategies that I use in my classroom. I use Marzano's 6-step vocabulary. I use cooperative learning. My students love to learn together and pair share, and that is the highest level of learning. And my students know that when you can teach someone else, that is the highest level of learning. I use visual representations. Those notes that I have listed in my Google Classroom for my students, that creates visuals for my students to kind of refer back to. Reciprocal teaching, the scaffolding, I love to do that when I pull them in small group. And then also when I'm doing whole group, we do I do, we do, you do. And then whole brain teaching. I'm big on whole brain teaching, and you'll be able to see this in my fourth step of this where I'm teaching. I do a lot of repetition. I do a lot of hand motions, and students really know my expectations and rules in my classroom, and it really creates a positive learning environment. And I love whole brain because it can also be done through virtual. I've done it whenever we taught virtually, and students respond the same as they would in the classroom, and I absolutely love that. So that is so helpful. And I believe that I have touched on everything. So thank you for listening, and you'll be able to see all of these things in action when you see my teaching video. Thank you.